Welcome to another edition of the Undaunted podcast. My name is Mark Johnson. This is my partner, Geoff Lawton. And
Good morning.
Last time we talked a little bit about, we got to hear Geoff's story about how he got involved in men's work. And this morning we're going to hear my story about how I got involved in men's work. I have no idea what I'm going to say. I'm just going to shoot from the hip and we'll see where it ends up. Geoff, feel free to ask any clarifying questions along the way.
Absolutely.
But this is a question I actually get fairly frequently. People want to know how I got where I am and what I've learned along the way and how I learned it and all that. The easiest way to say it is I've been a seeker my entire life. From my earliest memories, I've always wanted to understand how the world works and understand. As I got older, it became understand how the universe works. But I've always been a seeker.
When did you first realize that? What were you just sitting in your room one day and you suddenly began wondering about how it all works, or was there some kind of circumstance that you were in that ignited that? I've always been curious about when did the light first go on?
I think when I came out of the womb, basically. I can't remember. I mean, there were events that happened that took me in different directions at different points in my life, but I literally cannot remember a time when I wasn't intensely curious and wanting to understand how everything worked. I wouldn't have used the word seeker probably until I was in my, late 20s or something like that. Simply, I just wasn't familiar with the word. I'd never heard the word before. It was just what I did and how I was and who I still am. So yeah, there was no, but I can tell you, when I was young, I spent all of my time like running around in the creeks in my neighborhood. I was the guy that was always, looking at all the life forms that were in the creeks. I was always fascinated by the way the plants that grew on the bottom of the creek beds waved in the water, the flow of the water, and the crawdads and the tadpoles and the fish and the frogs. And I mean, I just loved. It wasn't about studying those individual things. It was more about watching how everything fit together and how everything worked together and how everything was interdependent on everything else. That's what really got me. Before I knew what microclimates were, I was always fascinated by microclimates because there would be these, farm fields and, along the fence line, like a fence line is a microclimate. There's life that exists along a fence line between farm fields that doesn't exist, the rest of the field. Or if there was a creek running, a natural creek that running through a piece of property, that creek is its own microclimate. And there was the life that existed in that, what felt to me when I was young, like in that isolated, separate spot, just fascinated me. And I was fascinated by the borders between the microclimates. And I was always amazed by the interface between where this is the farm field and this is the creek bed, or this is the farm field and this is the fence line. And I remember spending a lot of time thinking about and just observing how those areas overlapped and interacted. And I don't know, I was just always, even this is when I was single digits years old, 4 or 5 years old. So just always who I was. then I started. I went through. I grew up in a Lutheran church and went through the confirmation process, and um, that was interesting because I took that seriously, and I went through the confirmation class, and um, it made me ask a lot of questions that were uncomfortable for the pastor of the church we were in at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable for my parents, not uh, mostly because I was too young to understand human nature at that point. I think I was 13, 14, something like that, but I didn't really understand human beings. Um, but I was perceptive enough to see when the human beings in the church weren't following the rules of the church.
Yeah.
And so I started asking questions about hypocrisy. And of course, being the brooding, moody teenager that I wasn't exactly asking polite questions. I was very angry, as a lot of kids are at that age. And I declared myself an atheist and swore I'd never go back to church again.
Wow, I've never heard that story.
Yeah. And I did. I stayed out of church except for I think holidays with my parents for probably 15 years at least. I don't remember, maybe 20 years, something like that. It was a long time. And I was just, yeah. But what happens when you keep seeking, at least what happened for me, is atheism soon, well, not soon, but it took a while, but atheism became empty.
Mm-hmm.
And it, it failed to answer the questions that I was looking for answers to. And I could never wrap my head around the idea that the earth and all the life on it was just a cosmic accident. And not only is it a cosmic accident and it just happened because two proteins happened to accidentally form together, but we're the only cosmic accident in a universe that is incomprehensibly large and populated with an incomprehensible number of stars and planets.
Right.
Um, so that led me to start looking more deeply. And also, I had a lot of experiences that um, didn't make any sense in the absence of some form of universal intelligence.
Yeah.
So yeah. Then um, what really sent me into what got me on this path to start doing this work is in back in early 2000s. I lost just in the space of a month. And I say this because my friends and I, this was the joke, because we made a joke out of it, even though it was serious at the time. I lost my job, my girlfriend, and my house in in the space of a month. And obviously, I didn't actually lose the house. We were moving out of the place, but it just happened to coincide with losing the girlfriend and the job at the same time. And I came home from being walked out of the building, because that's what they do when you work for big companies, and
Yeah.
drove home and sat on the bed for a couple of minutes. I was in the house by myself, and uh, just kind of collapsed into myself, curled up in a ball, um, laid down on the floor in between the bed and the wall, because it was the smallest space that I could fit into. And I gave up, not in the sense of being suicidal or anything like that, but I basically cried out to God, whatever that meant to me at the time, and said, I give up. I don't get it. I've done everything I know how to do. I've followed all the instructions that I've been given, and Nothing's working. I don't know what to do. Help me. Please help me. And that was the crisis point for me that set me on the path. And up to that point, I was 35-ish, 34, something like that.
Yeah.
Up to that point, I'd been following all the conventional wisdom. I had been following all of the career advice, all of the popular relationship advice, and did my very best to execute all that advice. And it was a profound and abject failure. And so I knew at that point that pop psychology was not it. I knew that atheism wasn't it. And all of the popular relationship advice that I'd ever gotten was wrong. And so I started looking for a new way, and started working with a spiritual teacher. Started reading books, very deep and challenging books, starting with a book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And one thing led to another, and here I am.
And in the course of all those stops along the way, when did it occur to you that specifically working with men, I mean, I know, when you were a teenager in early 20s, you did a lot of outdoor adventure type work and, guiding people on river trips, etc. When did you get the celestial light bulb that well, part of what I'm here to do is to support men in particular, not exclusively, but that was a lane that you were really called to?
Well, that really started, I guess, about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But as part of the work that I was doing, starting in the even starting in the late 90s, and all through the early parts of the 21st century, I did, co-ed based work exclusively. And because that's what was available. I mean, I wasn't aware of what men's work was or why it would have mattered. Nearly everything that was available was co-ed. And what I recognized after, I don't know, 15 years of work or something like that, is that men needed their own space as much as women did. And that as men's spaces got destroyed, which they have nearly all been destroyed over the last 60 years or so, and they were destroyed in favor of creating co-ed spaces. But then apparently co-ed spaces were good and women-only spaces were good because there was still there was a radical rise in the number of female-only spaces, which fine is a good thing. But it didn't make any sense to me that we should be destroying male-only spaces, all while creating female-only spaces, and co-ed spaces. And I saw men flailing and failing in the absence of male only spaces, including me. And the solutions to the challenges that I had in my life were spiritual, certainly. Um, and at a temporal level, I recognized I needed male only spaces because when men and women are together, we act differently.
Yep.
We defer to each other. We accommodate each other, um, as we should. That's normal and healthy behavior.
Yeah.
Um, but in the same way that women benefit from female only spaces, because then women can just be women without the uh, I'll say this, I mean this jokingly, the corrupting influence of a male presence. Um, Men benefit from male only spaces without the corrupting influence of female presence. And
Yep.
when I say corrupting, I mean distraction, because
Yeah.
we are different. The studies are super clear on this. Put men and women together, we operate differently than when it's men only or women only. And as soon as I recognized that and started benefiting from those male only spaces, it became like the next natural progression in my seeking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which led you to my basement.
Right. Yeah. So then I got invited by a friend that to a men's group that Geoff was hosting in his basement, and that was about 10 years ago now, or so. Yeah,
10 or
10 years,
11. Yeah.
11 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and true to form, I started seeing possibilities almost within just a couple of months of joining the group. And I went to Geoff. It must have been like a year later, and said,
Yeah.
"We can grow this. We can help way more than just the guys that are in this room." And we formed a nonprofit, and here we are, 10 years later, 11 years later.
Yeah. One thing I take away from everything you've shared that I've known about you for a long time, but it's something I continue to really admire and respect is your your clarity. When you get clear on a possibility, um, like we could grow this to reach and impact more than the 8 or 9 guys that were hanging out in that meeting. Um, when you get the vision, you go after it, which is really one of the most, I think, beautiful aspects of masculine energy. Is, we can fumble around when we do with our thumb up our butt and trying to figure, well, I'll speak for myself, trying to get direction. And when we get an internally embodied sense of where we're supposed to be going, the masculine is that energy that will go. Like, okay, we're off. And I've just seen you do that over and over and over again over these last 10 years. And been a great model for me. And, it is what's really needed now more than ever for all men, in my opinion, to tap into that inner knowing and that wisdom and that sense of direction. having the courage, once you have that sense of direction, to go after it, and also, when you're not sure a next step, then, I know you go in, you go up, and you go to that vertical connection. And when that guidance comes, what I make up is that there's that place in you that we could call your inner compass, that's set inside the duality of spirit and, human self. But there's that inner compass in you and me and in every human, but certainly we're talking about men and masculinity. And I think that's the beauty of part of what we're doing with men, offering men, is to be able to relearn. Your story about being 4 or 5 and, being out and looking at where, kind of the natural life on the fence line and the streams and all that masculine curiosity and a willingness to take risk and all that kind of stuff I think we all start out that way. At least we're born with that inherent ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I know that for me, when I was about the same age that you were, 34, 35, when I started trying to figure out who the fuck am I and what am I doing here, being around other men was what helped me begin to re-key, and particularly getting the reflections of other men of how I was showing up that I couldn't see because I was too close to it. So your story is a great example of when you find your compass, follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that we should be talking about that.
Well, before you go there,
Yeah.
because there's something that I think is important.
Yeah.
When and it's an important part of my story, because back when all this was going on, I was back before I curled up in a ball on the floor. I was what this is before the internet. This is before, popular media and pop psychology told me I should be. I was a sensitive new age guy. I was a sensitive 90s guy. And the very first thing that my first spiritual teacher did was, and I say this, and I say this because, and I know it's going to trigger some guys, and oh well. She helped me man up. And manning up is one of those things that the stereotype, the way it is now characterized in the popular media. If you tell somebody to man up, it's mean, it's insensitive. It means you're supposed to suppress your emotions. You're supposed to repress your emotions. You're supposed to deny essential elements of who you are as a human. And nothing could be further from the truth. Manning up means to be fully present in your fullness as a man, which means you show up in a masculine manner. You make things happen. You take care of what needs to be taken care of. That is essentially a masculine trait. Whether it's a man or a woman doing it makes no difference, but it's a masculine trait. And all those negative connotations are an unfortunate byproduct of a profound misunderstanding of what it actually means. And I got a lot of gifts from that process and understanding what it means to man up. And frankly, it took me an embarrassingly long time to really understand what that meant and to be able to embody it. And in a lot of ways, it is the single most transformational phrase in my life.
Yeah.
It is the most it's the most empowering thing that you can help someone experience what it means. Because you are no longer operating as a victim. You're no longer living at the effect of your circumstances. You begin to operate at cause in your own life. And it is ultimately empowering. No suppression, no repression. As a matter of fact, denying the value of manning up is suppression.
Yeah.
Is repression, because it is denying an essential part of who we are.
Yeah, it's also worth repeating something we've said many a time, that is equally valuable as the feminine being what that authentically is. We need both together.
Sure, of course. Yes, absolutely.
You know, that they serve each other at their best, they serve each other, and they can be an amazing team. And as somebody who was very disconnected from my masculine energy for a long, I was a sensitive new age 80s guy. Though I never had the mullet like you did, but I God, the difference it makes. And I'm so grateful to get to be witness to how the men in our community, the men we support, are rebalancing themselves and getting reconnected to their masculine that got taken away from them in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
We invite you to share questions or comments to this video. We will respond. And we appreciate you being here, and we'll be back again next week.
Thanks for watching.
Take care.